If it was sadaqah, you did it for yourself. Right? And that's why even some of the ulama say that if somebody gives sadaqah, you have to be careful to say, ad'uli, because it's a type of men. Like if you give sadaqah to somebody and then you say, make dua for me. In other words, quid pro quo. Like I'm giving you this, so I want dua for, I'm expecting something in return. People don't think about these things, but these are the subtle realities of something from inside you. You know, that you're not even aware that you're assuming. And this is why even giving charity, traditionally you were supposed to give it with the lower hand. So you don't hand it like that, you actually hand it like that, because the Prophet ﷺ said the upper hand is better than the lower hand, meaning the hand giving is better than the hand taking. But in sadaqah and zakat, it's not. They're actually giving you. It's an opportunity for you. So they're the givers. You get more out of it than they do. They get a material thing, but you get a reward with Allah. And what a difference between a material thing and a reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's very important not to do that, to remind people, oh, look at all I've done for you. Now, parents can do that, you know, so I'm just letting you know. Like parents, because the maqam of the parent, it's a metaphor really for, right? It's a way to enable you to understand your relationship with your Lord. And this is why that relationship is the foundational relationship in human societies, because your father and your mother, they are the ones that have nurtured you. Your mother, hamalathu, wahnan ala wahn. She carries you sapped and weakened of her strength. And so the parent can do that. If a child is disrespectful or disobeying, they can do that. They can remind them, after all I've done for you. I mean, you can say that, just let them know. And it's usually better that one parent does it on behalf of the other parent, especially the father, because very often the children respect the father, but they don't respect the mother, because the mother's with them much more. So it's very important for the father to remind them, like to tell them, I was there when she was up in the middle of the night taking care of you. I was there when she was changing your diapers. I was there when she was, taking care of you when you were vomiting and when you were, just to remind the child, because it's very important that they be aware of all that is done. And people, they don't think of these things because we're in states of heedlessness. We don't think of what Allah is doing for us in every instant. I mean, right now, your immune system is functioning. You were probably exposed to several. See, now he was away from his desk. See what happens? After all I've done for you. So, and then he says, وَلِلْأَذَى مِنَ الْوُجُوهِ كَمْ وَكَائِنْ وَكَذَا. There are many types, because adha is another thing. It's harming other people. And, one of the things you have to really remember is that people, there's a famous French philosopher, he said, hell is other people, right? But the reality of it is, maybe that has a certain element of truth. There is a very hellish aspect of having to deal with unwell people, what they call high maintenance people. But the reality of it is that all of us, we're in this together. And if you want to be in a society or a community that's healthy, the single most important thing is not being a source of harm for other people. And one of the most harmful things that we do is with our tongues. We harm other people. And that's what he's talking about. He's talking about all the ways that we harm people with our tongues. And he begins with kalhuz'i, mocking people, yastahzi'un. And this is one of the things, traditional comedy, if you look at traditional comedy made, you can make fun and do these, but now there's a type of really dark comedy where they make fun of real people, specific people. It becomes entertainment to laugh at other people real people, and they have all these television programs of people making fools of themselves and going out and showing how dumb people are by asking questions and exposing their ignorance and things like that. This is really prohibited in Sharia, because one of the things is, but for the grace of God, there go I. There's this idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a tribulation. If people are in the states that they're in a tribulation. And so the compassionate person is the one who looks at other people and sees a creature of God. It's a makhluk, somebody that's created by their Lord. And they have in them this extraordinary capacity. And if that hasn't been nurtured, if it's been stunted, very often it's the environment that they grew up in that stunted it. It doesn't have to do with them per se. You can take a person and put them in terrible environment and they emerge in a certain way, and then you take that same person as a seedling, as a young person, and put them in a good environment, and they'll be very different. We have masses of sociological evidence to support that case. And so just looking at people with compassion, not making fun of them. With tarwiyah, it's prohibited to scare people. And this includes, they mention Muhammad al-Mawlud, or Muhammad al-Hassan mentions even like scaring them with noises coming up from behind them and shouting. Or he says using the noise of a wild animal, scaring. And this is very common. People do this as a joke. But the people that have a serious vasovagal response like me, I mean, you can literally, you put my kidneys in my throat. If you honk a horn behind me, I mean, I just jump, right? And it's actually very, it's a horrible experience. And people think it's funny, because I walk along the road and sometimes somebody will literally just honk, like young kids, 18 or 19 or something. I didn't have my gun with me. I couldn't do anything about it. They just honk and shout at you. And it's like a big joke. And so that's what he's talking about, scaring people. Some people get some perverted pleasure out of this, like they really enjoy causing other people pain. And then he says, togaf. Togaf is a Mauritanian word. It's from Hassaniya. Hassaniya is a dialect in Mauritania, but it's related to the word waqf, probably, because togaf is, if somebody tells you something and says, oh, so-and-so said such and such about you, and you say, come here, and you go to that person, and you say, did you say such and such to that person? You can't do that. Because one, the person that's relating to that should not be relating to you, because it's namima, right? It's separating between people and causing fitna. But the other thing is you're putting that person also on the spot and getting them in a serious problem. And then those type things can lead to blows and all kinds of problems. So he's warning people about that you can't do that. وَغَيْرِ ذَلِكَ مِنَ الْأَصْنَافِ, and other variations of those things. Bismillah.
يحرم في حضوره وغيبه في نفسه أو أهله أو كلبه وأهله وكلبه لابد من تحلل البنين والأب إن سقيت ذا بنين. Indeed, harm is prohibited whether the one harmed is present or absent, and whether it concerns himself, his family, or his dog. In order to rectify such wrongs, you must set things straight with the man harmed by such remarks, as well as with his children, if you happen to have spoken ill of someone with children.
So what he's saying here is there's other ways that you do this, and it's prohibited to do this whether they're there or whether they're absent. So you can't make fun of people if they're there. I mean, obviously there's bantering that goes on between people that love each other, and if they know that and understand that, but you have to also be careful about that, because people, it depends on their sensitivity level. You have to be aware of people, but those are called nukat, yunekket, or something. But people do this, like, we don't think about this, but every culture has groups that people make fun of. Right? So if you're from Egypt, you have all these stories about people from the Sa'id. Right? That's what they do. If you're from Syria, you have stories about people from Homs. Right? This is like every culture does this. They make, but you know, and the problem with these things is that usually it's because of a naivete and a purity that's in those places, like because there are people that tend to believe people. There's a famous story of Aquinas. You know, I don't know if it's true, but there's a famous story that he was a very gullible person. And because of his credulousness, one of the monks said, "Oh my God, a flying cow." He's looking out the window. And Aquinas ran to the window, and all the monks started laughing at him. And he just turned and he said, "Better to believe in flying cows than in lying monks." Right? Which is called, you know, husn al-dhann, right? Or better to believe in a cow that flies than in a monk that lies. So that gullibility that certain people have, that's actually from fitra. Fitra people are very gullible. And sophisticated people tend to yunakkat alayhim. They tend to make fun of them. So in the Sa'id, you have people that are closer to fitra. And so because of that, when they come down to the city people that are very sophisticated will tend to trick them, cheat them, so who's the real one that should be made fun of? Right? Now, if a Sa'idi tells you the story, it's different. Because people can, you know, make fun of themselves. That's always a good thing. But you just have to be careful with that, because that's what he's saying, that you can't say it about the person, about his family, even his dog. There's ghiba in dogs. So if somebody has a dog and you say, "What a mangy dog," and that person, if he's hurt, some people, you know, like one of the things about Turkey is we forget that these are, they're Central Asian, that, you know, they're people that came from a nomadic tradition. In fact, the place you're in is called Yurtkur. You know, and I asked if the etymology was yurt was part of it, and one of the Turkish linguists there told me it was, that kur is something permanent. So yurtkur is like a permanent yurt. But the original peoples were nomadic peoples. Whenever you have nomadic peoples, you have dog people. Whenever you have nomadic people. If you have people that move, you have dog people. Because, and this is one of the great events in human history, is the domestication of the dog. It's a very important creature in human history. And so there are dog peoples. They keep dogs. Nomadic peoples tend to keep dogs. Nomads needed dogs to warn them about raids and things like that, because dogs will hear something from a very far distance, and they're very high sensitive in their hearing, so they would hear something that could warn the people. So you tend to see dogs are taken care of. The Baladiyah takes care of dogs in this culture. In other Muslim cultures, dogs are tyrannized, which is a really bad sign if you treat dogs ill. And the hadiths that talk about the dogs had to do with the kalb al-aqur. There were very violent dogs that came sometimes into the city of Mecca, and there were some black dogs. They were from a certain group of dogs, and the Prophet ﷺ, those were the dogs that he was talking about. But the Prophet ﷺ lived amongst peoples. Many of them kept dogs. The Bedouin kept dogs, and the Mukallabun are mentioned in the Quran. If there's a dog that's trained to hunt, it can hunt for you. Kalb al-Hirasa is one in the Maliki madhab. Ibn Abi Zayd, the great Maliki scholar who's called Malik al-Saghir, had a dog. He kept a dog, and somebody mentioned it to him because he was, at that time there were Shia in Qayrawan, and some of the Sunni scholars were under threat. And he was worried about that, so he took a dog as a hirasa, and he said if Malik was alive today, he'd take a lion. You know, so people have dogs, so if you don't like dogs, that's fine. But if somebody has a dog, we went to a house here, and they had a dog outside, and he was very worried because some people are very sensitive about dogs. I told him, I don't have a problem with dogs. So talking about. And then Murabt al-Hajj in the Sidi Khalil, there's a section in one of the chapters called Salam, which uses as an example the himlaj, which is a type of horse that's very slow. And Murabt al-Hajj is a true story. One of the students was reading with Murabt al-Hajj the text, and he mentioned the himlaj, and Murabt al-Hajj explained to him what that type of horse was. And he said, you mean like so-and-so's horse? And it's a negative quality. And so Murabt al-Hajj told him, he said, the reason I don't mix with people is because I don't want to backbite, and I don't want to hear backbiting. So if you're going to study with me, don't speak ill of people. Because that's ghiba. Because if the person heard that, they might actually be upset about it. And I heard from one of the people who lived with Murabt al-Hajj for over 80 years, he said nobody in this entire hayy, which is, where they lived, the whole vicinity, nobody in the 80 years that I've known that man, nobody has ever heard him speak ill of a human being. And he took that very seriously, the prohibition of ghibah. We don't take these things seriously, but there are people that take them very seriously. And they're a hujjah, they're a proof against people of not speaking ill, because it's very easy to speak ill about people. And Imam al-Bukhari, who his job in life was ilm al-rijal. That was his entire career, is looking at all of the people that narrated hadith, the men and the women that narrated hadith, and determining who was valid and who was invalid. And he said, I am looking forward to meeting my Lord and not having one case of ghibah in my sahifa. Not one instance of backbiting in my... And this is a man who his job was to criticize other people. And that's how vigilant he was. And that's why they reach their maqams, the places they get. So he's warning about that.